Today I got video from a black conservative perspective on why education is so messed up in the United States. Please like and subscribe on your way in. Let's get it.
Okay, let's talk about it real quick. Let's make it make sense. I'm not sure why the video of the teacher crying went viral. Maybe because it was a male teacher crying and expressing his feelings, but he's telling y'all the same thing teachers have been trying to tell y'all for the last decade. That these kids cannot read, they cannot write, they cannot spell, they cannot tell time, they cannot do math, they cannot do science, they cannot do history. Matter of fact, I straight up told you that these kids don't know nothing. And y'all got mad at me. Maybe I wasn't clear when I said that these kids don't know nothing. They don't know their middle names. They don't know their last name. They don't know their home address. They don't know how to address an envelope. They do not know phone numbers by heart no more. And one time I asked kids if they were in trouble and they had no other number to call, who would they call? And not one kid said 911. They cannot write a complete sentence. They don't know what a subject is. They don't know what a verb is. And don't get me started on a predicate. You can give students the plot, you can give students the setting, you can give students the characters, you can give students the beginning and the end, and all they got to give you is the middle, and they still can't do it by themselves. You can ask them what a verb is, what a noun is, what a proper noun is, and they cannot tell you. And we are not talking about elementary kids. We are talking about middle school students. We are talking about high school students. We are talking about students on full college rides. College professors, y'all okay? That's why teachers don't want to teach. It goes against their morals. It goes against everything that they believe. They don't want to pass kids along who can't do nothing. It's going to affect society, and everybody's going to blame teachers. But they got on designer. They got on $200 shoes, though. They look good. And it's not just black kids, it's all the kids. It's private school, charter school, public school, everything. Make it make sense.
I literally broke down in the middle of class because I'm teaching seniors. These kids are leaving high school and going to college. Hopefully, we had 2 paragraphs to read, 1 sentence complete to write. I gave them the sentence stems. I basically completed the
Sentence stems, also known as sentence frames, where they give you the whole sentence, you just got to fill in the blank.
sentence for them in the model. And they couldn't fill in 4 words. 4 words.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about teachers who are now lashing out, exposing the truth about our current modern education system, especially post-COVID, post-pandemic. Kids have gotten dumber and dumber and dumber. Apparently, it is the beginning of the school year, right? Kids are going back to school. They're showing up, right? And their teachers, their new teachers, are like, damn, these kids are dumb, right? They're stupid. We've had a lot of teachers who have spoken out about this. They've taken to social media, some in tears, after realizing that 12th graders can't read, right? It's a very sad and unfortunate state of events for this country, for our youth. But again, a lot of it, in my opinion, has to do with the pandemic and the precedent that was set during the pandemic. Okay, when you talk about learning loss, okay, kids doing distance learning, which was stupid, right? In hindsight, a lot of kids missed out on quality education, right?
I completely disagree with everybody blaming the pandemic on learning loss and stuff. There was learning loss, but that's not where all these problems started. These problems started a long time ago. I don't know who remembers, but, years ago, schools were told that they're racist because they were giving out more referrals to black and brown students than white students. So therefore, schools were racist. So what did schools do? They didn't really change anything in writing. All they did was they stopped writing referrals. Many teachers will attest to this, that you can send a kid out of class for throwing stuff in the classroom or hitting another student or something like that, And that student might come back to class 5 minutes later. Even if it's not that extreme, okay, let's say cursing out the teacher. Cursing out the teacher, flipping them off. Send them to the office. Okay, you might have to have security come and take them out of your room because they don't want to listen. And then they might be back in your classroom 5 minutes later. All right, I've been in education before for many years. I stopped about 2 years ago just because I'm tired of it. They had I don't remember what the title of the guy's job, but he was like restorative justice coordinator or something like that for the school, and each one of the schools had one. And I spoke to a couple of them, and they all said the same thing. That's like, no, we just talk to them. We keep them here till they calm down, and we send them back to class. That's it. They never did restorative justice properly. And then also, it's no big surprise, the woman right here behind me, behind my picture, and this woman, and this woman, and this woman, and this woman, a majority of this Board of Education in Nashville, Tennessee, are black. They are in charge of education now. They have been for a long time. And we wonder why education keeps going down, because they don't want to have consequences for actions. They don't believe in, trying to make kids do the work and stuff. So it's just very unfortunate. And the lack of consequences goes hand in hand with lowered expectations. Lowered expectations for learning. And then also they've changed the rules where students don't get zeros anymore. Okay? Almost every school in California, the lowest grade a student can get is 50%. So you get 50% F, any work you do after that brings you up. So it's almost impossible for these students to fail if they just show up to class and get participation credit for being in class. It's insane.
A quality learning experience. Also, this was during peak wokeness, in which they basically didn't give a damn about giving kids a quality education. They were basically saying, if you just show up, you can pass, right? Because giving kids grades that they actually earn, okay, and making sure that they actually learn the material is racist, okay? It is hatred, it is bigotry, and because of that, again, these standards have been lowered, particularly for so-called students of color. So when you combine those two things and the fact that this culture never kind of went away, right? It kind of stuck with us even to this day. I'm not surprised to hear stories like this story we're going to cover right here, as you have a teacher from the Metro Nashville Public Schools area. She was actually Teacher of the Year. She is resigning. Okay, you have a couple teachers actually that are resigning after exposing the scam that is modern education. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
And we spend 40 hours a week with these students, so we know them better than the district and those fake numbers. Please stop undermining our professional decisions, because honestly, it's breaking the efficiency and it's giving HOA quality.
A Teacher of the Year with Metro Schools is speaking out to News 2, explaining why she resigned. Welcome into News 4. I'm Kendall Ashman.
And I'm Tori Gessner. Samira Hardcastle graduated from Metro Schools, then taught for them for 8 years. Here's News 2's Alexia Chiropoulos with more.
I was Teacher of the Year at John F. Kennedy Middle School in Antioch. What you have in front of you right now is my resignation letter.
Former Metro District school teacher Samira Hardcastle taught for nearly a decade.
I love making a difference.
But over the years, her concerns grew, which she says led to her quitting in May.
It became where I really wasn't even teaching anymore.
She walked me through the major reasons why. The first related to
district leaders asked me to fabricate grades for a parent who sat in the office for hours until her daughter's failing grades were changed.
Wow.
The kids don't put in the work, they get the grade they earned. And the parents would come and complain and argue and say that I didn't do something correctly. And so then when the district gets involved, they just side with the parent to shut them up.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is to blame the teacher, right? When you talk about the issues with our education system. But Honestly, I think that most of the blame goes to the parents, right? Because when you have parents who don't read to their kids, who don't care about their kids being educated or trying to educate their kids, those parents are a problem. But you also have the parents who basically feel like their kids are entitled to good grades, right? They are disappointed that their kid is not that smart, right? But they're like, no, I demand my kid get good grades regardless, right? Those parents are just as bad.
I completely agree with them on this. That, a lot of it is parents, because parents don't hold their kids accountable, don't think they should have to do stuff, think that they should be able to get full credit just for doing the assignment. They come in and yell and scream at the principal and vice principal and stuff until they get their way. And for years, at least in California, for years, at many different schools, that's what happens. The parent comes in, screams and cries to the principal or vice principal, and then the school gives in and just does whatever the parent wants, and it doesn't solve the problem. I had a student, one student that basically I was told, no, when he gets on his phone, leave him alone. When he is ready to re-engage with class, he will get off of his phone. It's like, wait, what? I had another one where the school told me strict policy, no cell phones in class whatsoever. You see it, you have to take it, turn in the office. I go to class that day. What happens? There's a student listening to their music, and then I get in trouble for saying, no, sorry, you have to give it to me, or if you don't want to give it to me, you can go to the office and explain to them why you don't want to give it to me. Student went to the office. The psychologist or whatever came to the classroom to yell and scream at me about how dare I, when it's like, hey, this is what y'all told me. So not, let alone that one student above all the rest being allowed to listen to music in class is just ridiculous. I don't see any reason for that whatsoever. But then you blacklisted me from that school for me following the school's directions to me. It was insane. It's the weird, double weird standard or something. I don't know.
And clearly you can see that this teacher is dealing with parents who basically feel like their kids are entitled to passing grades, right? That their kid should not get the grade that they earned.
Down to Metro Schools for comments. Specifically regarding grading, they say in part, quote, there was no written school-wide policy at the time that prohibited the student from being given an opportunity to complete the work. After the work was submitted, the principal independently reviewed the assignment and determined the score it earned. The principal did not select a score for the purpose of producing a particular final course grade, end quote. But grading was just the tip of the iceberg.
Maybe 7 or 8 of those kids out of each class are large behavior issues.
She says protocol for student discipline meant calling parents first.
Parents will cuss you out. You write them up. You're not allowed to fully document the write-up because it will look bad on the school. We're forced.
Yeah, so not only do the parents feel like their kids are entitled to good grades, right? Grades they didn't earn, but they also feel like their kids are entitled to not be held responsible for their bad behavior, right? And that is the worst type of parent, right? The worst type of parent is the parent that has a child that acts up in school, but it doesn't matter if you actually call the parent because they don't do anything about it. In fact, some of them will defend their kids' bad behavior, right? Those are the absolute worst type of ones. And
the schools are just as bad. Like she was saying, that you're not even allowed to write them up properly. I don't remember how many times I was told, no, students do this, or this. Just write them a referral. But the problem is when it actually comes down to that, no, now you're in trouble for writing the student referral. You're not allowed to write a referral without getting in trouble. And for some reason, you are the one that can't control your student if you have to write a referral. So this being held across whole districts and stuff makes teachers be like, no, why am I gonna write a referral and get in trouble and jeopardize my job when the school doesn't care?
They're bad because, again, they defend their kids' bad behavior. But also on top of that, it is likely, since they're defending their kids' bad behavior, that they also don't give a damn about their kid being educated, right? They just don't like being called and having to deal with their kids' bad behaviors.
He's absolutely right. And a lot of these parents think of school just as babysitters. Literally. I've actually heard parents say this, that, you know, they don't care if they get an education. This is just, the only reason their kids are in school is because they're required to have them there. That's it.
Blame the teacher in the school instead of their kid. It's kind of crazy. But everybody has seen parents like that.
To keep them in our classroom.
To that, MMPS tells me in part, quote,
I say
we have no evidence that this allegation has been substantiated at JFK Middle School or district-wide. MNPS has established disciplinary processes and procedures that outline appropriate interventions and responses to student behavior.
Boom, there it is. Interventions and responses to student behavior. What they're trying to say is their interventions and responses are, we remove the student from the classroom, we talk to them for 5 minutes, they must be hungry, that's why they're acting out, let's give them something to eat and send them back to class.
Behavior, end quote. She also says hundreds of dollars from her paychecks went missing.
Like $500. It set me behind on my mortgage. And then, you know, I'm wondering why. And they sent out that email saying that it was to pay other employees. That's unacceptable.
MNPS says to that, in part, quote, we reviewed the former employees' payroll records and found no evidence that MNPS withheld or took back pay in order to pay other employees. It is possible the concern relates to required tax withholdings from a state-funded teacher bonus, end quote. During the Metro meeting, this was the board's response.
Thank you. The time.
Okay.
But you can email that to the board.
I'm not emailing them because why? I mean, they're not going to respond. Or if they do, it'll be some fake email that their PR team sends out, and I'm just not interested.
Now, since her social media post has gone viral, the majority of Metro District teachers that she's heard from say they have the same concerns. She hopes parents across Nashville start asking questions.
Yeah, so she's not the only teacher sounding the alarm on the scam. You also have another teacher as well, too, who is alleging grade fabrication.
Show former John Overton High School math teacher Diana Wills also fought back against changing failing grades, writing, what is being done is unethical and could very well be interpreted as illegal. The emails show that administrators wrote Wills had failed students, but had not alerted their parents to their failing grades as required by district policy, and that because of it, she needed to pass the students, giving them a D.
That is a false statement. That's why all schools send out progress reports. Progress reports go out from every single school, no matter where it's at. Y'all get progress reports like a certain amount of time before the final grades, and that's enough time to make up and change your grade. So that's just a straight up lie.
Wills fired back, saying one student was told many times to make up the exams and never did, and that she was out on medical leave for much of one semester, and asking, when was I supposed to be contacting parents? Writing, quote, you can cook the books to have the data look the way you need it to. For 3 days, WSMV4 Investigates has been asking Metro schools for an interview. Instead, we received emails. The district spokesman writing in Will's case, there was a difference of opinion on district policies, and the grade changes did, quote, not meaningfully affect the student's final outcome in those courses. In response to Hardcastle's complaints, the spokesman wrote her claim does not fully reflect what occurred. As for the incomplete art project, there was no written school-wide policy at the time that prohibited the student from being given an opportunity to complete the work. So the student finished the project and got the grade.
Wait, hold on now. Isn't that up for the teacher to determine, right? To get the timeline? It seems like this school district, they're investigating themselves, and lo and behold, right? They're finding nothing, right? We've investigated ourselves and we didn't find a damn thing, right?
Yep.
That is what this sounds like to me, okay? It sounds like the school is refusing to acknowledge what these teachers are saying because they don't want to admit that essentially they're letting these kids just get away with not learning anything, right? And not being held accountable for when they're late or they miss an assignment, right? It's shameful stuff, to be honest with you.
Grade. After speaking with WSMV4 Investigates, Hardcastle then went before the school board Tuesday night, publicly making her claims about changing failing grades.
It creates false entitlement. What happens when these kids lie, cheat, and cry their way through school and end up as future doctors, police, or politicians?
Samira Hardcastle says she has now left the teaching profession entirely. Before she quit, she was given a disciplinary action, accused of unprofessional communication with another parent and student. Now, we asked Diana Wills for an interview, but she is now suing the district for suspending her, and her attorney declined our request.
Jeremy, I think a lot of parents watching this may be surprised to learn that a Metro teacher does not have the final word on a student's grade.
Yeah, that's right, Tracy. They don't. According to these emails, principals can and do make the final decisions in these conflicts. If there's something you want me to know for...
Wow. Yeah, I think that principals who do that, right, who are like, hey, I'm going to override the teacher for the sake of just, keeping the parent in check, right? Yeah, they're the ones who are responsible. Ultimately, it comes down to the principal. It comes down to the leadership because the teacher is just doing their job, right? If the principal comes in and overrides the teacher and says, hey, this child deserves a better grade than he actually earned, then again, the principal should be fired, honestly, right? That should be a fireable offense. I don't think that there's any scenario where principals should be overturning a kid's grade unless there is some actual evidence that the teacher did something wrong, right? Or that the kid was unfairly graded or mistreated. But just saying, hey, I'm going to overturn the grade because the parents are complaining, the parents don't agree, that's wild. That's wild.
I completely agree with them. And, like I said, grades start at 50% in almost all schools now. That's the policy, that you start grading from a 50%. So if a student doesn't turn in an assignment, they get a 50% on the assignment. How do you get a 50% on an assignment that you don't even turn in? It's because they're basically cooking the books, and that, along with a lot of the other stuff that's been going on and the lack of discipline and holding students accountable and stuff, it just lowers standards and raises student expectations, thinking I should be able to graduate just by showing up to school. When I've worked at a couple of schools where you have like 100 students or more showing up like a half an hour to an hour late every single day. And you could tell why most of them showed up late. And it's because they don't really care, or they're not good at getting up, because the other part of this is almost all of them had breakfast from McDonald's or Starbucks or something like that. And it's like, really, how are you going to show up late to school, an hour late with Starbucks? It's like, really, that could have took you a half an hour just to get your Starbucks. So it's kind of crazy. And the grading thing, I like it and hate it at the same time. Okay? Because it's not fair, or the old ways were not fair. So like when I was in high school, I got A's and B's on all my classwork, all my tests, stuff like that. Okay? But I did zero homework because I had a ton of chores. And then after all the chores and stuff and helping make dinner and dishes and stuff like that, I had maybe like an hour, maybe two tops every night to just watch TV, relax, or do stretches, or do some art or something like that. And so I never did homework. But how is it by not doing any homework, your grade drops from like an A- all the way down to like a 50% F? It's just ridiculous. So I kind of agree with grading differently, but at the same time, it just doesn't make sense. But also, I don't know, back then, I always argued with my friends saying it didn't make sense to me. How can I have an 80%, even if I lose the 20% that was for homework? Even if I lost the whole 20%, if I have an 80%, doesn't that take me just down to 60%? Which I always had over 80% with in class and tests and stuff. Like I said, I got A's and B's. So realistically, if you didn't count homework, I would have had, 88 to a 94%. I was a really good student, except for homework. So if I had 90% and I lose 20% for not doing homework, shouldn't I still be at a C? But no, that's for some reason teachers did something weird and always dropped me down to failing, like they were just mad at me for not doing homework. And that kind of brings me to the point that teachers have too much control. Okay, I've had students where I've only had like 20, 30 assignments for the whole semester. Okay, no homework, 20 or 30 assignments for the whole semester. There's more than 30 days in a semester. That's less than one assignment per class. Okay? There were still some students that were struggling, where they were still getting like a C or a D in my class with only like 30 assignments and only in class work. And I wasn't always grading. Well, I should say I wasn't always grading their first attempt or whatever. It was, okay, you didn't do this correctly. Let's go over it. Let's get you to the point where you can do it correctly. And then if you can't, as long as you put in the work and eventually learn, when you learn, I give you a good grade. The only students that weren't able to do that and were getting the C's and D's were the ones that would just show up to class and be like, no, I don't need to do this. I have a job after I graduate. No, I had a girl in middle school. She was what was she? I don't know, she was a 6th grader or a 7th grader. And she was like, I'm just going to be a hoe. I was like, what? What do you, I didn't realize. I was like, no, she can't be talking about what I think she's talking about. But yeah, that's what she was talking about. My mom's a hoe, I'm going to be a hoe. I don't need school, I'm just going to be a hoe. And trying to change that child's mindset about that over the course of that year was really, really tough. And I know I helped change her a little bit, but I don't know how much of a dent I put, because it was all from the mother, the single mother that taught her it's okay to be a hoe.
Oh, so this is an all-around disaster in my opinion. But, it's like I said, in the future, people are going to talk less about the wealth gap, and they need to talk more about the intelligence gap, the education gap, right? Because that is really what's going to determine the wealth gap moving forward in the future, because you have so many dummies, right? And especially going into a world where you're going to have AI, you're going to have artificial intelligence. You need these basic skills more so than anything, right? Because in order to effectively use AI, right, to augment your intelligence, you need to understand how to reason, right? You need to understand logic. You need to understand how to critically think. You need to have basic reading skills. You need to have basic writing skills. You need to have basic communication skills. You need to know how to think, right? And if these schools aren't teaching kids how to think, right? How to critically think, how to reason, okay, how to use logic, how to do basic reading, problem solving, math, they're gonna get left behind, right?
I definitely agree with this, but at the same time, I don't know how many times I've used ChatGPT and had like discussions with it, arguments with it, stuff like that. And it's given me not necessarily the wrong answer, but a different answer than I was looking for, especially with like statistics and stuff. Okay. I'll ask for the raw numbers of something, and it will go through and just shoot out the per capita stuff. I'm like, that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking this, dependent variable, independent variable is this and this. And, I'm looking for the raw data for this, just tell me the raw data. I don't want the per capita because that's not how it's done. And then it would still spit it back out at me again. And I would say, no, you're not listening. Okay, this is not the way a study is done. A study is done by using the dependent and independent variables. You need to compare those together for each population in the study. So the dependent variable would be like, a big one that I saw that freaked me out was in police custody, people dying in police custody. Okay, and the independent variable would be whether you're black or white, okay, or brown or whatever. And it kept shooting out per capita for the whole population. That's not the way a study's done. You're supposed to take, what's the percentage of black people killed in police custody compared to black people in police custody? It's together, black people in custody and how many of them died. That's how you get the percentage, the statistic. And then you do the same thing for white people. The only time you would, compare to per capita is if you're talking about other ideas and questions you have about how per capita may be affected because of the large discrepancies and stuff, which I realize more white people die in police custody than black people, because when I saw the whole George Floyd thing, I flipped out because of the numbers that the news was putting out. I was like, oh my God. The word, police are genociding black people because of the statistic they showed and how they presented it. And I jumped online and did the study myself. This was before ChatGPT, or before I had access to ChatGPT and stuff. So I just went and looked up the raw numbers from the government sites. And I found out it was a lie. And I'm like, well, how did they get that number? And I realized, okay, they're probably going by the whole population because that's how you would manipulate it to make it look different than it actually is.
By people who do know how to do that, right? And again, in a world that's accelerating, things are getting faster, things are getting more complex. Again, you have artificial intelligence. Those who, again, don't have these basic skill sets, they're going to get left far, 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 far behind, right?
Yes. And, once again, the other thing is political ideology. Political ideology. So like ChatGPT is a huge Democrat leftist. Okay. You can still use it for a lot of things, but you have to know how to give it the proper commands and in order to make it give you the straightforward answers.
That's what's going to happen. And that's what makes this so devastating. And, that's kind of how people get upset and then revolutions happen.
Sorry, prompt engineering is what it's called. But prompt engineering is just basically giving the AI the proper instructions on what you want.
And then, you got socialism and communism because you got all these kids, these dummies who don't understand anything, who don't know how to do the basic stuff. They're getting left behind, right? So that's, again, the unfortunate reality. This teacher deserves an award for speaking out. She actually cares. She actually gives a damn because, it's easy to say, you know what, screw it. I don't care, right? If the teachers, people who actually care about the kids, if they are not going to be respected by the parents, if they're not going to be respected by the administrators, then, hey, the easy thing to do is just say, let me collect a check and keep it moving. But these teachers refuse to do that, and I think that they should be commended for it. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.
I completely agree with them. And the biggest problem for teachers like myself was I loved helping students. I loved helping students change their behavior, help get them education. I've gotten some great compliments from my students on how much they've learned compared to what they've learned, the rest of their lives in school and stuff. And I just always feel for them. And teachers do enjoy what they do. Almost every teacher I've ever met loves teaching students and helping students. but it's always the politics. It's always the schools, the political environment, the administrators, the administrators. I said that weird. The administrators and stuff. So, yes, once again, like he said, let me know what you think. Please like, subscribe, and I will see y'all next time.